with Danny Page.
Yeah,
And we are pleased to be with you today as we put into effect our remote studio here. Danny, we got a big show, though, because today we're joined by Bobby McMahon.
Yeah, and perfect timing, too. Bobby had a big story that ran for Forbes today, talking about really the state of Spanish football. Nick, it's something we've been wanting to get to for a long time, and we finally get to do so today with who else other than the big man on campus, Bobby McMahon. I'm really stoked.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, you can reach us in studio, 800-878-PLAY. That's 800-878-PLAY. Give us a call. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. Once again, Nick Geber and Danny Page. You can find us on Twitter at World Soccer Radio. Danny, some other big stories. Michael Laudrup finally getting the sack. Does that make sense to you? 50 times that he was good?
Well, Nick, Michael Laudrup. Yeah, the thing about Michael Laudrup is that he, was a leading candidate for the Real Madrid job. He showed loyalty to the Swans, and in the end, the Swans sack him. I'm not sure if it was the best move, but then again, I'm not the owner of a team staring down a relegation battle. It'll be really an interesting part of the discussion today on the show. And where does Michael Laudrup, his flowing football and fantastic hair, where does it go from here now? Well, I think is a big question.
Well, Danny, I think the hair stays firmly implanted on his head. I mean, it stays right there. I'm pretty sure that hair doesn't move. Much like Kyle Martino. I think they come from the same hair family. But other than that, yeah, where does he go? And, of course, I have to say, if he gets sacked, Renee Muhlenstein's got to be out the door.
Yeah, a lot of people think so. It's a tough day for Fulham losing their FA Cup replay. They are out of the Football Association Cup, and even more so with so many quality teams in front of them winning this weekend. They are certainly, they're at the foot of the table now, but Muhlenstein just came on. That's a different one, a different topic that we'll probably get into as well on tonight's show.
Yeah, so much to get to. Once again, we do have Bobby McMahon with us, and of course, a big hello to our men and women in uniform listening around the world on American Forces Radio. A pleasure and a privilege to speak with you as we do each and every weeknight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific on these very Sports Byline network stations, and of course, American Forces and iHeartRadio and TuneIn.com and Watch WSR on YouTube, our live feed, which is now, we could take it on the road, Danny. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to go to break
tonight.
All right, welcome back to the show, World Soccer Radio, Sports Byline, USA Radio Network. Nick Geber and Danny Page with you today. Give us a call in studio, 800-878-PLAY. That's 800-878-PLAY, so that we can all participate together. We got a great show, Danny, because it's not often that we get Bobby McMahon on. Probably not enough, actually. We should probably have Bobby on quite a bit more. But it's great to have Bobby on, especially because he's written such an interesting article about Spanish football. And Danny, I've been on this Spanish football kick for a while. Not that I don't like Spanish football, I really do. But the discussion really is about whether, if we're looking at financial fair play, Danny, you know, there is a great inequality in Spain right now.
Yeah, there really is. Incredibly different levels of play that we see on the field, and remarkably different levels of financial success and breaks and, prowess and ability. I mean, really, this entire league is basically built on shadiness. I hate to not have a better way to put it, but did you see the study, the survey that came out yesterday? I read it in the BBC, where they questioned citizens of nations around Europe, and the question was, how does corruption play a part in your daily life? Okay, and the two nations that had the greatest yes responses were Spain and Greece. And frankly, anyone in Spain that watches Liga BBVA, that watches Spanish football, should have responded yes, because it is a corrupt league. The top teams are allowed to do whatever they want and make as much money as they want. And Bobby had a great story on it today in Forbes, and we'll discuss it on the show.
Yeah, we're going to get into it a little bit, because it is a fascinating topic, because in Spain they're considering redoing the TV rights a little bit similar to how they are in the Premier League. And of course, right now in Spain, all the teams negotiate their own Premier League rights. Danny, a couple of other stories before we get to all of this stuff,
right,
because we got Michael Laudrup, we got Fulham, we got the situation at Man United, we got the Chelsea-Man City issue going on still. I mean, there's so much to get to. David Beckham will be announcing tomorrow the Miami franchise. That's obviously what it is. Don Garber doesn't get on a plane and go to Miami just to be cool.
He's not going to Mansion to see Steve Angelo or anything like that.
I doubt it, Danny. I doubt. Something inside me just says probably
Liv?
not.
What about Liv? No, I don't think Don Garber is a Liv kind of guy either.
No. So that announcement is forthcoming, and I think this is a very, very risky proposition from David Beckham. I really do. I mean, he is putting brand Beckham on the line now. If this franchise fails, Danny, he is going to lose a lot of value.
Well, I'm not sure. The thing I wonder about is the way that he and his people have looked at the sporting landscape in Miami. Are they looking at it and saying, oh, this is wide open, that players will want to play here? Yes, that's true. Others will want to invest here. That's probably true as well. Fans will want to come to the match. That's the problem. Does he have any idea what the Miami Marlins have gone through? Has he been to a Dolphins game? Does he know that Heat fans are some of the worst in the NBA despite having the best team in the NBA the last 3 years? Miami, as far as the American sporting landscape is concerned, is a graveyard. And that's why there is no longer an MLS team there, because despite obviously the Latin culture, which helps make Miami such a wonderful place, I just don't think it can support, or that fans want to support, 25,000 to put 25,000 butts in the seats every week. This is Miami. This is not a Midwestern city. There's so much to do. The sports, the way to describe sports fans in Miami, a lot of ways, is apathetic at best. I just don't see it as being a great spot for an MLS team. I don't get it.
Yeah, no, I have to admit, I am a little, I'm trying to think of the right word for this, nonplussed by it. It's the wrong Hispanic makeup, really, for it. If you think about it, it's a city with so many other distractions, top to bottom, and lots of bottoms there, I might add. That I don't know. It's failed before. I'm not optimistic about it, and what'll be interesting to see is what the ramifications are for Beckham himself.
Yeah, I wonder how it will affect him personally. Because I don't know, Nick. I see any team really as a sports franchise in Miami as just being crash and burn.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, do you really think that South Beach based sports team can really thrive, or downtown, whatnot? I just don't see it happening. Even when you look at the football teams at the University of Miami that were so incredible, a lot of times they wouldn't even sell out. This is not a city. All right, I live in L.A., you're Southern California. You do as well. L.A. sports fans are very fair weather people, okay? Why don't you take the population, cut it into just a third of L.A.'s population, and then look at fans that are twice as apathetic? I just don't think it can sell really down there, and I'm not sure he recognizes that. Even with Brand Beckham behind it, they can have a couple good years, and that may be that.
Will they have a new child? Will his name be Sand in the Butt?
Oh, gosh. I have a tweet coming in from Eric Hunt. Eric says, if the Miami franchise fails, what do you think will be the broader effect on MLS expansion? I think that the Orlando franchise will be successful. I think that if they were to put a franchise in Atlanta, it would be successful. They've had a lot of hits as far as expansion goes. If you have one miss in a major market like this, I don't think it'll be a big deal, because I think there will be other cities that will be rushing to buy this franchise, or at least, take over it and move it to their city. Isn't that where MLS is right now? Gosh, your backdrop, Nick, I just looked at the show on watchwsr.com. I mean, what? First of all, it's horrible that your face is that close to the camera.
Yeah, well, I can back off a bit here, Danny. Yes.
And second of all, are you in some? Have you moved to the adult film industry?
Well, I am in my house in Vegas, and and
the walls are red.
It is in fact a brothel. And look, there's Wayne Rooney. Hey, Wayne.
Gosh,
yeah, we got some older ladies in the back for you. Don't worry.
I knew that one. Poor Colleen. Colleen seems like a sweet bird,
Not exactly the sharpest pencil in the pack. In fact, let's face it, none of the Rooneys really seem like they're going to be getting any PhDs in anything anytime soon, Danny.
If there was one person I'd want to interview in person, someone I'd really like to interview in person, it would be Wayne Rooney.
Yeah.
Because I just want to hear that voice and his scouse little girly accent. It's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. But that's what David Beckham thinks he's going to do. Is he thinks he's going to bring it, not start a brothel. He thinks he's going to bring in.
Why doesn't he start a brothel?
He thinks he's going to bring in a Wayne Rooney type. Listen, Kaká could sign with this Miami team within the next year. There is obviously a significant transplanted South American population in Miami. It doesn't matter. People are not going to come out and watch an MLS team in Miami, because they just don't care. Have you been to South Beach?
I have.
There are so many other things to do in that incredible city.
No, I happen to agree with you, but to answer the question specifically, what do I think the effect on MLS expansion will be? I don't think it will have any effect on MLS expansion. I think MLS, in my mind, makes a mistake when it tries to compete in cities that are very sport heavy. There are a lot of cities right now that are vying for MLS franchises. I mean, let's look. Orlando was a great one. Is a great example. I mean, Seattle was a great example. Portland was a great example. Putting another Montreal. I mean, there are other sports teams there, and it works. But when you are talking about the current crop of expansion, and right now, looks like San Antonio's coming up to get a team. I mean, these are markets where the sports teams are very well attended. The sports teams are very well frequented. And there is a market for it. So you're either looking at a secondary or a tertiary market where there isn't enough sport and they want to bring in an MLS team because it's got a lower barrier of entry, or it's a market where they do have a lot of sport, but it's very a market that really are great sport consumers. I'm sorry, for my money, Danny, I just don't think that Miami qualifies as a market that is full of great sport consumers.
Couldn't agree more, man.
All right, you are listening to World Soccer Radio on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. We'll be right back after this.
My joints used to kill me. I'd wake up with
All right, folks, welcome back. World Soccer Radio, Sports Byline USA Radio Network. I'm Nick Geber along with Danny Page. Give us a call in the studio, 800-878-PLAY, 800-878-PLAY. Of course, you can find us on Twitter at World Soccer Radio or Facebook, facebook.com/World Soccer Radio. You get the idea here, right? All right, well, it's time to bring in our guest, and we're very, very pleased to welcome to the show a guy that is a regular contributor to this show, although, if I might add, not regularly enough. From Fox Sports, Mr. Bobby McMahon. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nick. And that would be, of course, former Fox Sports.
Former Fox Sports, yes, with all the changes going on. Yeah. Yes, and you are sorely missed, Bobby, let me say.
Oh, thank you. But having fun with James Sharman in Canada on Soccer Central every Monday and Thursday. There's a blatant plug.
Well, plugs are great. Plugs are fantastic, Bobby. And we're also putting up your Twitter handle up there on the screen if people are watching at Watch WSR, so people can get that. Bobby, you wrote a wonderful article about Spanish football, particularly about the situation at Racing Santander, where the players in the Spanish Cup walked off the field because they had not been paid in forever and a day. This was we talked about this very briefly on the show at the time. And look, Bobby, I've been a big critic of Spanish football, not the beautiful football that we watch with the top three in the Primera Liga. I mean, not those guys. The whole organization itself is one full of rules that are there to be broken by the people that have the money to break them.
Yeah, I think Spanish football is, let's say, the rules are very flexible.
Yeah.
Depending on who you are and what circumstances you find yourself in. You go back to the time when they signed David Beckham and they enforced, or they put through the 25% tax rule that applied to not just sports stars but also to artists as well. But to give them the Spanish a little bit of a break. Maybe what it comes down to, Nick and Danny, is they just love the game too much, and they've got all these special rules. And in terms of how some of the additional help they get from councils and regions and all the rest of it, it just seems that they really just don't treat it as soccer. They treat it as something that is worthy of special treatment, and they've got themselves in a real mess. To the extent when you look at it, they're vastly overstretched. The whole model, apart from Barcelona and Real Madrid, is totally unsustainable, and you sense that with the economic crisis that hit in 2008 and continues in some parts of Europe and some other parts of the world, that they're in a situation that they can't get themselves out of.
Well, it's an interesting situation because you have a scenario in Spain where you've got many Spanish football teams that pay very, very little tax. Some of them, as you mentioned, Bobby, have been exempted from tax. Many of them are actually funded indirectly by the taxpayers. I'm talking about, of course, Barcelona and Madrid, the two biggest ones of all. Yet here you have a country that has had economic crisis beyond anything we could imagine here in the United States. They've had to go to the European Union for money, for bailouts, for financial plans. The Spanish economy's in the tank, yet they're still finding ways to cut tax breaks for football and to maintain the status quo ante in Spanish football, which is Barcelona and Real Madrid, bringing in all the big TV revenue, the big standard bearers for Spanish football. And I think the world may well have kind of evolved, the football world may have evolved beyond that at this point, Bobby.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things as I was prepping for the article and going through some of the research and looking at some of the history. I was reminded that it was only a couple of years ago, just as Spain were going to the European Union looking for a financial bailout. This time, I think it was a Spanish minister of the cabinet, minister of the government, suggesting that they should write off the debt in terms of taxes that was owed by soccer clubs to the central government. And the Germans, particularly given that the Germans essentially are where the bailout funds are coming from in most circumstances, were absolutely apoplectic at the thought of something like that continuing. Now, once again, to perhaps give them a little bit of credit, that there does seem to be a move towards centralising and collectivising the sale of La Liga rights. So instead of Barcelona, Real Madrid, and many other teams doing it individually, that they will come together as a collective, like they do in Serie A now, and like they do in the Barclays Premier League, and sell it as a collective. But there's some impediments to that. Primarily, it looks like it's something that's going to happen far too late. They originally were talking about 2015-2016. Now it looks like it might be 2016-2017. And the other caveat to it is Barcelona and Real Madrid are beginning to make noises saying, well, we're willing to share, but we still want to get no less money than we get when we're selling individually. So there does seem to be this kind of large gap between what they intend to do and actually making it happen.
Well, I mean, what's it going to take? What's it going to take to really force a change? Because, one of the things that I was hopeful for with financial fair play was that they were going to take a look at the books of Barcelona and Madrid, and they were going to sort of expose what is the inherent disadvantage that all the other clubs in Spain get to, because, of course, if you're talking about financial fair play, you can't possibly talk about Spanish football more than any less than any other country, but Spain just seems to be rife with sort of unfair advantages. And again, here you've got a situation in Santander. They were playing in the top flight, just 2 seasons ago?
Yeah, well, I think, as I was prepping for the article, and going through some of the research and looking at some of the history, I was reminded that it was only a couple of years ago, just as Spain were going to the European Union looking for a financial bailout to the Yep, and then they went to motion. But I think you can look at the Spanish situation as a whole, but and I think it's fair comment to go back in years gone by when Real Madrid, it looks very much like they got a sweetheart deal as far as selling their training ground was concerned. But Real Madrid really, they're a money machine. It's this kind of the Scottish aspect of Spanish football that really is that's undermining it. Mm-hmm. You've got. In Scotland, you've now got the top one, but you used to have the top two that dominated and everybody else came after. But in Spain, even notwithstanding Atletico and how well they're doing this year, they're also a club that are mired in debt as well.
Yep.
So you've got this situation that money has been sort of siphoned off to the big two for so many years that the other clubs really are a little bit of an irrelevancy.
Well, there was some talk about new oligarch ownership coming into Valencia. Is that discussion still going on?
Yeah. Well, but I think I think you've got to look at that from two perspectives. I think although oligarchs and money coming from very deep pockets have helped out some clubs, in many other situations, Malaga being a prime example of it, Malaga went through the same situation. The money was there for 1 year and then disappeared. Malaga essentially collapsed, had to start selling players. Manager disappeared, etc., etc. So manager was Pellegrini at the time. He's off to Manchester City, and Malaga, are back to almost where they started. So I'm not sure that there's just not, put it this way, Nick, I just don't think there's enough rich people in the world to actually bail out the Spanish teams as they sit just now. They seem to be on that treadmill at the moment of constantly looking for financial saviours, men with deep pockets and big egos. But as I say, as we've seen in many other situations, that's often a short-term solution, and it sort of evaporates as reality begins to hit, and these people begin to lose interest.
Now, Bobby, you said men with deep pockets and big egos. All they have to do is look to some of our network heads. I'm sure they could find themselves a few owners there.
Possibly could.
Hey, Bobby, we are going to have to go to break here in just a couple of minutes. We're going to I'd love to keep you with us. There's so much I want to ask you. Are you good for a little bit longer?
Oh yeah, no problem, Nick.
Absolutely. Well, we don't have to go quite yet, but I do. You mentioned Scotland, and Scottish football has managed to fight amongst itself to make everybody there irrelevant. I want to talk to you about the state of Scottish football very briefly, and then move on with you to the Premier League and discuss, I don't know what it is with Scottish people today. Of course, let's talk about David Moyes, the situation at United, what's going on with obviously Chelsea and City and that great rivalry, and get a brief your thoughts of the table in the Premier League and where it sits. So I'd like to get to all of that, Bobby, but before we do, I mean, you made that comparison between Spain and Scotland. I mean, you can't be serious, right?
Well, it's essentially, you're talking about a much larger population base in Spain at 60 million, but you go back over a number of years. The really Spanish league is Real Madrid and Barcelona, but Scotland have managed to take themselves from relevancy in the 60s and 70s when the likes of Celtic and Rangers would consistently challenge for the top prizes in Europe, to the point where the economics of it just doesn't work anymore. You're talking about a population of 5 million people now. There is no way back as far as Scottish football is concerned with a domestic market of 5 million people. It just isn't possible.
Well, that is a discussion, and Danny, I know you want to chime in, but let's touch on Scottish football when we come back. Danny, are you good for that?
Works for me, man. I've always been so enthralled with the game, and who better to talk to about the game in Scotland than the big man himself, Bobby McMahon.
All right, you're listening to World Soccer Radio on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. We're chatting with now former Fox Sports host, but a man certainly about the football town. If you've been following football in this country for any length of time, you're going to know Bobby McMahon, and we are privileged indeed to know Bobby McMahon and have him with us on World Soccer Radio. He will be staying with us, so on the other side of the break we will pick it up again with Bobby. So much to get to. Of course, we've got to talk about Laudrup getting fired from Swansea, even after he was given assurances of his safety. That's just absolutely worthless. Anytime an employer says to you, yeah, you're good, I don't know. All right, Nick Geber and Danny Page with you on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back after these messages. Do not go anywhere.
Congrats.
All right, welcome back to the show, World Soccer Radio on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. 9 p.m. Eastern Time, folks. That's when we're with you, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Sports Byline Network. And, of course, American Forces Radio Network. A privilege to speak to our men and women in uniform. Nick Geber and Danny Page with you. We are on the line still with our very special guest, Mr. Bobby McMahon. Bobby, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay, good. Danny, I know you had a question for Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby, one thing I think you have to look at, it's in some ways, I think, similar to what college football has had to look at here stateside as it has revamped its system. What makes the Spanish League so attractive financially as far as, sponsors around the world and as far as, television numbers is the strength and power of Barcelona and Real Madrid. Do you think the league, obviously, they need to get things right financially. They need to create a level playing field. But how much really will this hurt the product on the produced by those top two clubs?
Well,
and do you think there's some fear within Spain that the league might step back a bit in regards to relevancy when it comes to evening the playing field?
All right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Danny, because they've got to kind of balance that kind of high wire act just now, because they can't afford for Real Madrid and Barcelona to be diminished in any way. But at the same time, they've got to raise these other teams. Now, I've seen some articles say that it hasn't actually all been that bad, the financial crisis for Spanish clubs. Not so much for the Spanish clubs, but for the Spanish game itself. Because as the stars have moved out, particularly going to the Premier League, it's given the young players another opportunity, so it's enhanced the kind of production line, so the quality is very much there. And that's not getting stifled, but how you actually move these other teams up and put them on a much more sustainable basis, to some extent, it's always going to come back to controlling costs. And you've got to think that Barcelona and Real Madrid have got to play a part in that as well, because as they race away, and you've got examples of Real Madrid setting world record after world record in terms of transfer fees and not blinking at spending money, you wonder if they do have to find a way of perhaps spreading the wealth and taking the risk that they might be diminished in the short term for a better long-term solution.
Yeah, but I mean, Bobby, it's going to reach a point in terms of the domestic league in Spain where no one is going to want to see any teams other than Barcelona, Madrid, because the other teams will all be living off their scraps. What that's going to do, and you made this comparison to Scotland, that is going to create a situation where European football is really the only football worth playing for these teams, because matches within La Liga are going to be useless.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to there, Nick, is potentially at some point, where do you just cut the domestic cord and finish up going with an all-European league?
Yeah,
we all enjoyed the Champions League, but at some point, I think this is inevitable. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I believe it will happen. Is we will finish up with some sort of European league. Because I think your point is absolutely well taken. So many times, as you've seen in Scotland over the years, and you see in many cases in Spain, it's a sort of variation of the Harlem Globetrotters playing the Washington Generals all the time.
Yeah, you know, Bobby. I mean, the one thing that I say about the Premier League, and I will continue to say it, is that top to bottom, it's the best league in the world. Now, that's not meaning to say that the best teams are not. The best teams are necessarily the best teams in the world, but the league as a whole, the competition throughout the league is far better than any other league I can think of, actually, right now, and has been for a long time. That's why the Premier League stays so relevant for so long. And it's, it's unusual that we get situations like we had last year where Man United ran away with it so early and there really wasn't much of a title race. Most of the time, it's pretty it's pretty good competition. We have more winners of our league, certainly, than Spain, maybe up until a point, Italy. So it becomes, we're going to have a situation where we're going to have England on the one side, which is going to have a competitive league with 20 teams, promotion, relegation, huge TV deal, and then you're going to have every other league in Europe, which is going to be extremely top-heavy, with TV money doled out on an inequitable basis. Maybe the Bundesliga will stand up along with the Premier League. I believe the Bundesliga is another good one to look at. But that's 2 out of all these leagues. That's pretty sad.
But you've also, when you come down to it, is you look at the German economy that's underpinned the German league. And let's face it, Nick and Danny, the German league went through some tough times just at the turn of the century there. There was a period there for about 10 years where Bayern Munich were pretty irrelevant, and most German clubs were pretty irrelevant. They took a big hit with the pay TV operators going bankrupt in Germany at the early part around 2001, 2002.
Yeah, I remember it well.
So they went through the other problems. But really, the Premier League, the strength of it is based on TV money. You take away that TV money and you'd be talking about a very different league. Plus, I think you've got to look at it as well. You've got to look at the historical perspective on this as well. Is generally the English league, before it was even the Premier League, generally turned over champions. You look at, they go back to the times of Nottingham Forest, coming up from the second division and essentially winning the first division. Derby County being able to do not exactly the same thing in 1 year, but getting very close under Brian Clough. So there's generally a kind of historical precedent for the English league being very competitive. And I think that comes back to the basis of the support, the and that's translated into massive money initially through Sky and now through BT. And I think that money's going to continue to flow, and so the Premier League is going to continue to get stronger.
Yeah. Bobby, let's turn our attention to the Premier League, where today Michael Laudrup got his marching orders from Swansea City. He did such a wonderful job last year, was heralded as bringing silverware, and wasn't... Well, what a wonderful manager, and got the most out of his team and all of this stuff, yet they struggle a little bit in an extremely competitive league, and it is an extremely competitive league this year, and he gets the sack. I mean, this propensity to pull the trigger on these managers who who just a few months ago were considered the talk of the town, to me, it's a head scratcher.
Well, I think it's sort of symptomatic of management and owners, is when they're confronted with a crisis, they've got an option: do they do something or they do nothing? And I think they're so frightened of the backlash from the fans of doing nothing that they will do something, even though in the long run it may not be the right thing to do. I think Michael Laudrup has been unfortunate, and a number of clubs have hit this over the years. You go back to Steve McLaren's Middlesbrough as an example, Alex McLeish winning the Carling Cup and then getting relegated. But teams that tend to do well and come up from that kind of middle bunch and excel, they just find it so difficult to keep it going. Suddenly expectations rise considerably with the fans, and then they're in a situation where they just can't back it up. Now Swansea, with their squad, they're having to battle on two fronts this year, with the league and also in the Europa League as well, and the expectations are higher. There's got to be, I don't think it's unexpected to have a dip, but I think the ownership and which partly is the fans, I believe there's the trust in place at Swansea that owns a significant amount in the club, but obviously with the money involved and the fact there's going to be even more money in the Premier League next year when the BT thing is kicked in now already, but the prospects of future increases as well are there. The money at stake is enormous, and I don't think anybody's willing to have egg on their face, so they pull the trigger.
Well, I mean, I look at the Premier League table, and I put it up on the screen if you're watching on watchwsr.com so that you can take a look. But it's fascinating to me because, Swansea are only 2 points off a relegation spot. But let's face it, I mean, they're 12th in the table right now. I mean, 11th is Stoke, and they're only 3 points off a spot. So, I mean, to fire a manager just because it's so compressed at the bottom end of the table just seems to me to be, riotously, unforgivably unfair. Danny?
Well, I couldn't agree more with you, Nick, on that one. It just seems a little bit ridiculous, especially because Laudrup was just so coveted. I wonder, talking about Spanish football, they loved him in Spanish football. And to me, it's more interesting to see what happens next to Michael Laudrup than next to Swansea. It seems like two misguided decisions as well from owners heading into the South Wales Derby upcoming here.
I think the other thing I'd add to it as well is, remember last year, they got a tremendous performance almost all year from Michu. Michu's been out for a lot of the year this year. He hasn't hit, and I think that's the other thing we often miss. We kind of poo-poo this idea sometimes that one man can make a team, but one man on a hot streak really can make the difference between being comfortable and perhaps being in relegation trouble. Swansea are now in a situation, realistically, they go on a little bit of a hot streak, they're going to be up the table.
Yeah.
But it's nobody's willing to take that kind of gamble at this point and willing to live with the consequences of it.
Bobby, I just want to interrupt you for a minute because one of the things I think is so very unfair about what happened to Laudrup is if you look at Swansea's matches over the last 10 matches, yes, they have lost 6 of them, but they lost to Everton by 1 goal, they lost to Chelsea by 1 goal, they lost to Man City by 1 goal, United by 2 goals, Tottenham by 2 goals, and they did lose to West Ham. That to me is the worst one, but they found a way to beat Fulham. They got a draw against Villa, a draw against Norwich, draw against Hull. So, I mean, they lost against teams one would expect Swansea to lose against. And, that to me is no way to judge a manager.
Yeah, but you go back to last year, and there were some of the teams that beat last year.
Yeah, but they had Michu, and they had a much healthier squad.
Yeah, but that's they can't fire a whole team, so they finish up firing the man. No, I'm not defending it. I'm just kind of rationalising it in terms of how the kind of mindset that I think the owners kind of take. Now, ultimately, the test will come at the end of the season to see whether Swansea survive and prosper and maybe move into mid-table, or whether they go down. But it's just the reality. I think that nobody is willing to take that risk with so much money at stake, and they're always going to be, I think, skewed towards making a move rather than not doing anything.
Oh, Bobby McMahon, it is always a pleasure to have you on. We'd love to have you on again, and I'd like to actually spend some time with you on the show, and I know Danny would too, really get into Scottish football because, there's a big danger about Scottish football that if we don't look at what happened in Scotland, and we can't look at what happened in Scotland and not think that it could very well happen to other countries in Europe and around the world as well.
Very much.
Bobby, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Danny.
All right, the great Bobby McMahon. Danny, it's always great to have Bobby on.
He's the man. He is just an awesome guy. He's so incredibly knowledgeable, very eloquent, well-spoken.
Are you talking about me?
No.
Oh, okay.
In fact, that was my first thought. Was it's nice to have someone on this program who has thoughtful, insightful comments, very different than what our listeners get 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific time, Monday through Friday. A pleasure having Bobby on the show. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But the situation in Scotland is fascinating, and I know I was watching your face as we're talking about it, and you're thinking, "Oh God, do we have to talk about Scotland?" But what's interesting about it, Danny, is that it could well be a model for what's going to happen around Europe if we don't get some sort of structure.
Great point. That is a great point, Nick. That the problems we've seen there could easily happen time and time again around Europe. It's going to be an interesting real decade in world football with financial fair play and obviously some of the budget constraints here, the big television deals. We almost need an economist to come on the show.
All right, we got to go to break. I'm Nick Geber. He's Danny Page. I'm coming to you from a brothel where I am certainly not wearing any pants. 800-878-PLAY, or find us on Twitter at World Soccer Radio. I'm just kidding, by the way. For good family entertainment. We do have to go to break. We'll be right back after this on the Sports Byline Radio Network. All right, welcome back. World Soccer Radio, 800-878-PLAY. Twitter at World Soccer Radio. Nick and Danny with you. Danny, it was great to have Bobby on.
Yeah, like I said, Bobby McMahon is the man. You follow him at Bobby Soccer Rep. 2 R's in that, at Bobby Soccer Rep. If you want to hit us up, we are at World Soccer Radio with just 1 R. Mind you, that will, we're just about to wind down today's show. I just have a couple tweets. Bernie Wilkinson at Bernie_J says the authors of Soccernomics would be a great interview.
Absolutely.
I'm a big Simon Cooper fan. DMAC brings up a great point. Same thing is going on in France. Just 2 good teams in PSG and Monaco. And I know they, quote-unquote, sorted out the tax issues with Monaco, but I bet the other French clubs are not very happy about that. I don't think we've seen the end of the Monaco question, we'll call it, when it comes to French football. So a lot to follow. Bobby McMahon, great guest today. You should follow his stories on Forbes as well, Nick. That's all I got, bud. It's all you.
All right. Well, Danny, thanks a lot. And, of course, we want to thank you for listening each and every weeknight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Sports Byline USA. It is World Soccer Radio, the nation's only syndicated radio show dealing with the beautiful game. There is no other one. There is no one else. And there is no one better anyway. But then there's no one else who could be better. You can find us on Twitter at World Soccer Radio. I'm Nick. He's Danny. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Once again, want to thank Bobby McMahon. And do we have more FA Cup tomorrow, I think, don't we, Danny?
Yeah, I think there are a couple matches. We'll follow those. The Spanish Cup semifinals, by the way, 2 Copa del Rey semifinals, including the Madrid derby. We'll be watching. We'll be discussing it live right here at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right, folks. Well, coming up next, a true legend of the game. We're talking about the broadcasting game, of course. Mr. Ron Barr will be up next here on the Sports Byline Network. So you be sure to stick around and give Ron a listen. If you haven't heard him yet, you will really, it's a real treat. So stick around and listen to the Ron Barr Show. You will love it. In the meantime, Danny and I are going to go away. I'm going to go live in my little red house. And we will speak to you tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Cheers. You take care.